Hello everybody, in this video we are going to continue our conversation about how to factor. And in this series of videos where our ultimate goal is to take a quadratic expression and be able to factor it by grouping. So before we can get there, let's do a quick review on factoring by grouping. Now when we do factoring by grouping, I do want to remind you we need 4 terms. Factoring by grouping does not work if we don't have 4 terms. So in some of the previous videos, we talked about how to find the greatest common factor and how to factor out variables and how to factor out negatives. So if that's still something that you're curious about or that you still have some questions, go back and watch those videos. But let's go ahead and take this that has 4 terms. Both examples have 4 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to split this into 2 twos. So notice that I have 2 terms here. I'm going to draw a line to separate the first 2 terms from the last 2 terms. Now be careful here because this plus sign belongs to the 8. So when you split it or draw that line, please make sure that the sign in front of the 3rd term still belongs to that side. All right, I like to just draw this line right here just to kind of keep everything separate. And what I'm going to ask you to do is ignore the second half because we're only going to focus on 1/2 at a time. So I like to cover it up or ignore it at the beginning. So we're going to treat this just like we treat any expression with 2 variables. Look at both numbers and find the greatest common divider. So what number divides into 40? That also divides into 35. Now remember, we're also looking for the biggest number. So sometimes we can use our calculator, but sometimes we can find that number on our own. So I'm just going to remind you real quick, you can use your calculator to find the GCF or the GCD. So I'm going to turn this on. I want to remind you that I am using a TI Nspire. And so from here, if you find menu, you're going to hit 2 and 5. And I'm going to type in 40, but remember you got to separate it with a comma. So 40, comma 35. Okay, I'm going to close it. I'm going to hit enter, and it does tell me that 5 is the biggest number. And I kind of figured, but sometimes it's good to just check. All right, so we're going to use a 5. Also keep in mind that they both have K. So if they both have K, I'm going to pick the one with the smaller. So we're going to take out 2 Ks from each one of these terms. Now, lastly, I do want to remind that the 40 in the front is positive. So that means that my 5 in the front will also be positive. So if I have a negative in the front, then I'll be dividing by a negative version of my GCD. All right, so from here, I'm going to ask you to do 2 things. I'm going to ask you to divide both of these numbers by 5. And then I'm going to ask you to subtract both of these exponents, just the exponents, by 2. So I'm going to open up parentheses, and I'm going to do just that. 40 divided by 5 is 8. 3 minus 2 is 1. Okay, I'm going to move this over. I'm going to take this 35 and divide it by 5, which gives us a positive 7. 2 minus 2 is 0, so that means a 0 Ks will go with the 7. All right, lastly, we're going to do these 2, and we're going to do the exact same thing and keep everything on the same line. I'm going to take this plus sign that's right here, and I'm going to bring it down. If that would have been a negative or a minus, I would have also brought that down as well. So I'm just bringing down whatever sign is in the front. Now, if I do the GCD on 8 and 7, it's going to come back as a 1. So that means there doesn't exist a number bigger than 1 that will simplify these. And that's okay. We can use a 1 here. So I'm going to put a 1. And then notice that they both don't have K. So that means that I'm just dividing by 1, which means it's going to stay the same. Because 8 divided by 1 is still 8. Bring down the K. 7 divided by 1 is still 7. And I do want to remind you that when we're factoring by grouping, we want to make sure that both parentheses are exactly the same. So this is a good checkpoint to see, did I do this right? And you'll know you did it right because both parentheses will be exactly the same. All right, so if they are exactly the same, you know you've done it right. We're going to ask you to take that parentheses and write it down once. When I write it down once, I'm going to cancel or cross these out. And that lets me know that whatever's left over, after I cross out and take out both parentheses, whatever's left over is going to go in the second parentheses. So I'm going to take my 5k squared plus 1. Now, one of the steps that I'm always asking you to do is please make sure that before you walk away from this problem, you make sure it's in simplest form. So the greatest common divider here between 8 and 7 is 1. So if I put 8 and 7 in my calculator, it's going to spit out a 1. That tells me there's nothing else to do. And if I plug in 5 and 1 into my GCD, it's also going to give me a 1. So if I get a 1 for my GCD, that tells me it is in simplest form. There's nothing else to do. So that means that this right here is my final answer. So with that being said, let's take a moment to look at the second example, and I'm going to walk through that one a little bit quicker. All right. So I want to make sure that it's ready for factoring by grouping, which means it's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So when I have 4 terms, I'm going to separate it. Notice that that negative belongs to the 15. And then let's go ahead and find the GCD. Now if I do the GCD of 3 and 2, I'm going to get a 1. And that's okay. I can use a 1 and I can divide by 1. So I'm going to bring it down. They both have m, so the smallest exponent is 2. So we're going to divide both of these numbers by 1, and then we're going to subtract both of these exponents by 2. So 3 divided by 1 is 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. 2 divided by 1 is 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. All right, you see this minus in the front? Bring it down. So just like I told you that if it's a plus, bring down the plus. If it's a minus, bring down the minus. And the greatest common divider between 15 and 10, the biggest number that divides into 15 and 10 is 5. They both don't have m, so I'm just going to divide by a negative 5. That's it. So negative 15 divided by negative 5 is a positive 3. Bring down the m. Negative 10 divided by negative 5 is a positive 2. I'm going to pause right here, make sure that I did this correctly. So I'm going to look at the parentheses, and I can see that they're exactly the same. They both have 3m plus 2. So I'm going to write it once and cross them out. When I do that, I can see that the only thing left over is this and this. So I'm going to put both of those in its own parentheses. So m squared minus 5. Now remember, even though there's a 1 here, I can leave it off because it's understood. So if it's not there, I know there's a 1 there. You can keep the 1 there if you want to. Now if I do the GCD on 3 and 2, I'm going to get a 1. If I do the GCD on the understood 1 and the 5, I'm going to get a 1. So that lets me know I cannot factor this any further. So that is my final answer. So I'm actually going to pause right here because the next steps we're actually going to do are factoring of quadratic functions. There's going to be a whole lot more steps because we need to go from 3 terms to 4 terms so we can factor by grouping. So I just wanted to give you a quick refresher on how to factor by grouping. So I hope that these examples have helped, and then I'll see you guys in the next video so we can actually do quadratic factoring.